One is the urgent need to restore order. What followed Wednesday's jury verdict in the Rodney King case was a tragic series of events for the city of Los Angeles. Nearly 4,000 fires, staggering property damage, hundreds of injuries, and the senseless deaths of over 30 people. To restore order right now, there are 3,000 National Guardsmen on duty in the city of Los Angeles. Another 2,200 stand ready to provide immediate support. To supplement this effort, I've taken several additional actions. First, this morning I've ordered the Justice Department to dispatch 1,000 federal riot-trained law enforcement officials to help restore order in Los Angeles, beginning tonight. These officials include FBI SWAT teams, Special Riot Control Units of the U.S. Marshals Service, the Border Patrol, and other federal law enforcement agencies. Second, another 1,000 federal law enforcement officials are on standby alert should they be needed. Third, early today, I directed 3,000 members of the 7th Infantry and 1,500 Marines to stand by at El Toro Air Station, California. Tonight, at the request of the governor and the mayor, I have committed these troops to help restore order. I am also federalizing the National Guard, and I'm instructing General Colin Powell to place all those troops under a central command.
We begin tonight with fast-moving developments in Los Angeles. President Trump deploying 2,000 National Guard members after violence and chaos erupts during immigration protests outside a federal building just moments ago. Police declared it an unlawful assembly. Those troops descending on the streets of L.A. Governor Gavin Newsom is blasting the move, calling it, quote, purposefully inflammatory and an alarming abuse of power. Nearly a dozen arrests overnight as some protesters tossed objects at officers, police using tear gas and flashbang grenades to disperse the crowd. Today, protesters were back out on the streets for the third consecutive day, some marching in downtown L.A. And police and protesters also squaring off here in New York City. Tonight, the Trump administration says California officials could face federal charges over their response. ABC's Matt Gutman is in Los Angeles and leads us off.
Tonight, hundreds of National Guard troops are deployed on the streets of Los Angeles. A convoy of heavily armed and camouflaged troops arriving overnight, establishing staging areas at downtown federal facilities. President Trump calling up 2,000 members of the National Guard in an effort to stamp out clashes that broke out over the weekend between law enforcement and demonstrators protesting ICE deportations. Tensions boiling over after immigration authorities conducted a series of sweeps in recent days, arresting more than 100 immigrants in Los Angeles over the course of last week. Dozens of demonstrators arrested since the clashes broke out Friday. Officers in riot gear using tear gas and flashbangs to disperse protesters, some of whom hurled projectiles. And in an extraordinary scene Saturday afternoon, a Black Hawk helicopter landing in the parking lot of a Homeland Security office. Agents unloading supplies for law enforcement. And we were there this evening as that standoff continued outside a federal facility in downtown Los Angeles. This is one of the tear gas canisters that was just deployed against some of the couple of hundred people here. And on this side, there are about 100 federal law enforcement, California National Guard. The president bypassing California's governor, authorizing the troop deployment for 60 days late Saturday, saying in a memo, the protests constitute a form of rebellion against the United States. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth adding on social media that the administration is also considering mobilizing active duty Marines if the clashes continue, an idea the president did not rule out late today.
What is the bar for sending Marines?
The bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, then we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order.
Local officials blasting the White House in response. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass writing, deploying federalized troops on the heels of these raids is a chaotic escalation. And California Governor Gavin Newsom calling the troop deployment purposefully inflammatory, adding the idea of deploying active duty Marines on U.S. soil is deranged. Today, Trump's allies in Washington defending the president's decision.
Do you have any problem or any concerns about the president sending in the National Guard to a place where local authorities say that they're not needed and could be harmful?
I have no concern about that at all. I think the president did exactly what he needed to do.
President Trump is putting the safety of the communities that are being impacted by these riots and by these protests that have turned violent. And he's putting the safety of our law enforcement officers first.
Lindsay, so this is the state of play. The LAPD has added reinforcements here in downtown. They've pushed hundreds and hundreds of protesters back, hundreds of yards. I just want to turn around so you can see the line of shells and canisters from flashbangs and less lethals that were used to disperse this crowd. They're still here. The standoff is ongoing. And just a reminder about the California National Guard. This is the first time that they were deployed by a president, bypassing a governor since 1965, Lindsay.
An active situation there, Matt. Thank you. Here in New York City, nearly 24 people were taken into custody. What started as a protest to ICE deportation operations turned into a standoff with demonstrators coming face-to-face with NYPD officers. Many were led away in zip ties. Tonight, 9 of the 22 people taken into custody yesterday are facing charges. First of all, starting with the fact that authorities are telling, U.S. officials are telling our team at the Pentagon, again, they confirmed 700 Marines. They're coming from 29 Palms in California. They've been ordered to assist in Los Angeles. They think they're going to be here in the next 24 hours. What's your assessment of that move there?
It's a little surprising. I didn't see that coming, but we talked about it, but I didn't think it would happen. It's a little surprising that it has. Mr. Higgs has said it, and now they're deploying. Generally speaking, in these type of situations, we just use the National Guard. And I'll tell you, Kana, we've used them time and time again in New York and around the country. They've used them as well. They come in and they stabilize. So if you have government property or government operations going on, they'll stabilize that by standing guard. So that's what I think the Marines will do. That's what the National Guard is doing. I don't think it'll go any further than that. And here's an issue here going forward into the evening. Right now they're in the afternoon there, but going forward in the evening, you have a police chief who said he was overwhelmed. He needs help. Hopefully he's getting that. You also have a federal officers assaulted on Saturday, which really started the ratchet thing, this thing, as well as property. We see something going on. It's not over yet. Hopefully this will end peaceably, and tonight will be a different story than it was last night with all the property damage, the back and forth against the police. Two different strategies going forward. But now, with this extra deployment here, I think they're just going to solidify government buildings. Is my guess now.
Which is what we've heard the National Guard troops would do as well, to really protect those federal buildings. But you touched on a couple of things here that I do want to highlight. One, we know at least 5 officers were injured. Another thing that we heard from the police chief as well, though, in Los Angeles, he said that days 2 and 3 in a civil unrest generally tend to turn more violent. So it sounds like that's something that we saw last night. Do you think that moving into day 4 today, we might see a change there, and that it may not get so violent tonight?
No, listen, the chief is, if you don't stem that the first night with significant deployment, you're going to have day 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you have to go out there immediately when this happens and try to stem this violence here. So I don't think it's going to get any better than the last night. Hopefully he has a resource. And it's really important to understand what you're seeing right now. This is just, you have people presently, not yesterday, but presently just protesting in an orderly fashion. No problems, everybody's fine with that. At nighttime is a different strategy. You have people come out looking for trouble, which is what they had last night. So he needs a different strategy. I hope he has it in place. I hope he has the extra resources. Because yesterday he did a great job in clearing out that area.
And our reporters on the ground really saw the same thing. They saw protests, and they saw the tide really turn as the sun started to fall. Different people showed up. They were wearing different things. They were prepared in a different way. And so we'll certainly be watching closely to see how this unfolds today. Melissa, our thanks to you, and Robert, our thanks to you as always. We'll be checking in with you throughout the day.
They create chaos, and they create control.
Over the world headquarters in Switzerland of the World Masonic Headquarters for World Freemasonry, over the door is Ordo ab Chao, which is Latin for order out of chaos. And all Freemasons know that term, Ordo ab Chao. Order out of chaos. The concept is to create chaos, to create the problems. Then while the people are frightened to death of all the crime and everything that seems to be out of control, a riotous situation, the government then moves in with justification. In order to put down this terrible chaos, they must have full power of the military, full obedience of the people to give the government full power to do whatever they want. That's why we're having all over the world wars, riots, bloodshed, famines, all kinds of things happening around the world. It's being manipulated. It's being orchestrated, not just for Los Angeles.
Conflict control.
Conflict control.
There's been more wars since the creation of the United Nations.
Democrats tell us money is the root of all evil in politics, and for once, they might actually be right. So is it money that motivates politicians? And if so, what's behind that money, and who is the person that pays for it? For liberals, that man is George Soros, and these are leaked memos from the desk of the billionaire progressive. They tell us what's behind that money, and let me just say, it should scare us. Soros gave $650,000, that's almost $1 million, to the Black Lives Matter movement to fuel the unrest that followed the death of Freddie Gray. He did this to, and I quote here, he did this to accelerate the dismantling of structural inequality generated and maintained by local law enforcement. Sounds insane, does it not? And his staff lied about it too. They denied ever sending money to the protesters, even though they did.
Let's talk about some of the protests overnight, because we have to turn our attention to this ugliness. More protests four nights in a row now that these protests have been happening, and they've been smashing storefronts, smashing cars. Take a look at the map right now, because this is where we saw it in Portland, we saw it in some different cities, but look at this. It's now even spread to Florida, upwards Boston, up into Detroit.
Here's the thing about these. Usually protests spread when their legitimacy is growing, right? If you think about that, like the legitimacy in the case is being building and things are getting bigger, this is spreading because it's intentionally being spread. More news is coming out about the funding from outside organizations, left-wing organizations, international organizations of elites that want to just say Donald Trump's not legitimate. Apparently the vote didn't matter.
And leaders behind these protests, including we now learn George Soros, Reverend Al Sharpton, George Soros, Reverend Al Sharpton, George Soros, Reverend Al Sharpton, Michael Moore, who's shown up to these protests. And so, getting out this message via social media, emails out to individuals. As Donald Trump had criticized these protests in the days after the election, they are not spontaneous. They're organized.
Right, but George Soros' piece is denying exactly what you're saying. He's saying this is not coming from outside funding. How dare you say that?
Shocking. George Soros, of course, will deny it. Having worked and seen organizations like this work for over a decade, they hide their funding. They never admit it. The group behind these protests and the ones that may happen at the inauguration, it's a group called Answer, an international Answer, founded to oppose America.
Who's making money on riots? Professional agitators for a start. But the trouble is figuring out who's paying them. Following apparent top-level security briefings on the subject, President Trump branded the 2025 LA anti-ICE riots as being fueled by agitators. While some dismissed these claims, they appear to have been corroborated by LAPD Chief of Police Jim McDonnell in a press interview, where he acknowledged that there are people in the crowd who, quote, do this all the time. This tracks reports of mysterious ads offering to pay up to $12,500 per week for rioters, as well as reports of pallets of bricks showing up near the protest zones without any apparent connection to known construction work. While it seems clear that there is a certain percentage of rioters and protesters who are there based upon their own personal convictions, the fact that professional rioters are a thing is cause for concern. Not because protesting is inherently problematic. It's not. It's a fundamental American right. But instead because it implicates the question of who makes money on it. This is a question that serves to unify the American people because we deserve to know the truth, whatever it may be. Who do you think is funding these professional agitators?
You handle the top down, but it's also bottom up and inside out. Top down, bottom up, and inside out. So now your challenge as you leave here, our challenge, is to take care of that bottom up part and that inside out part, the heart part.
The heart part. That's what did it for me. He said the heart part. I'm like, there's something wrong here. But I didn't know what this meant.
This is a tried and true technique that communists use to crush people of a nation between the members of a government at the top. Remember, he said, you've taken care of the top part. What does that mean? You put the right radicals in power. You've taken care of the top part. Then they get the radicals at the bottom to cause chaos. If you don't believe me, that's fine. I tell you, don't take my word for anything. You go ahead and look it up yourself. let me take you back to where I took you at the beginning of this program, Czechoslovakia. I only told you half the story of what the Czechoslovakians thought was happening to their country in the late 1940s. After World War II, Czechoslovakia was in real trouble, and people were hungry, and there was strife. And a small group of communists managed to gain power in the Czech government through parliamentary maneuvers. That was taking care of the top-down pressure. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to all the people in Czechoslovakia, they were agitating people, getting them out into the streets, riot, strike, protest, create the illusion of a widespread clamor for change. That was the bottom-up pressure on the system. Well, the people were left in between, and they didn't know the truth. They didn't know what was going on. They were hungry, they were scared, they were confused, and they were looking for help. When they cried out for help from the government, which they thought was not with the rioters, they got help. They had no idea that some at the top were in league with those creating the chaos at the bottom. The people at the top had formed a shadow government, and they were only too happy to help, and they helped by clamping down on the Czech people. So the Czech people were hit from both directions, top down, bottom up, and inside out. Their country was turned inside out. They didn't know what to believe. The same is now being called for.
Is it all starting to sound a little familiar? Remember, this was in 2010, and he was saying this. He was saying that this kind of shit was going to happen. Be on the lookout, America. So let me play that again and see if it makes a little more sense this time. Install a federalized police force.